Hold on, Chris. Hey, Chris, thanks for doing this for us.
Bart, it's my pleasure.
There we go. Thank you all for being here tonight for the third Bee Talks with the one and only Chris Kelly. I'll let Chris give you more background about him because he's like a stallion in a bee version, ready to get going, right? So, without further ado, introducing Chris Kelly.
Club, thank you very much for having me on that one. We've got on the other side of the pond, or actually north of the Mason-Dixon line, we actually have the group from Mattatuck here. And we're just delighted to do this. I have to be very, very honest. I was very anxious about doing this particular presentation. It is actually the very first time that I've ever tried to do a presentation that covers 50 years of beekeeping. So I want to start really kind of informally, okay? Because beekeeping for me has been a lifelong journey. And as I was reflecting, I realized first and foremost, today would have been my mother's 95th birthday. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah, it would have been my mother's 95th, yeah. And what it really reminded me of is that you don't get really anywhere in life without actually getting on the shoulders of some other people. And my parents and my mother in particular were particularly supportive. My mother was the editor-in-chief of my Long Island Science Congress project, which really was the project that launched me from being a little bit of a hobbyist beekeeper to getting me entry into Cornell University. It really opened the gateway there, and bees have been running in my blood since well, you're going to see a picture of me with hair, and then you'll figure out that's a really long time ago, okay? But the neat thread about it was that when I lived in Hawaii for 5 years, it was my mother who maintained the beehives, and I would tell her that was her maintaining the candle for when I came home. Okay, but she maintained the bees for 5 years, and then I came home, and then we went on from there. So I've had really the pleasure and the privilege of keeping bees over 50 years now. I did graduate from Cornell in 1982. Despite the objection of 4 brothers and a sister, okay? You have to come from a big family on that one. And then I started something called Promised Land Apiaries in 1986. And from there, we've gone on to, we own about 350 hives, and I manage about another 150 hives for clients on it. So you can actually, if you got internet, you can actually follow us on Facebook or Instagram. We'd love to have you part of it. So I really wanted to come down to just start with my personal joys of beekeeping. All right. Right now, my crew on the New York side are dying because they've never seen me with hair. Okay. But they're pretty familiar with me wearing a hat. But one of the things I don't know about you, but bees somehow really do capture you. Am I speaking the truth there? Yeah. Milton, do they capture you?
Yes.
It does. And I don't know what it really is. It just simply does. In fact, earlier tonight, I was talking with a student, and she's got the disease, okay? You know what the disease is, right? Is once you're hooked on beekeeping, you can't just have one. You got to have 2. Then all of a sudden it gets to 4, and then you're starting to go up to 10, and then you know you're out of hand, where every time you look around, you're thinking, well, I can do another beehive here, right? Okay? So I put this in here, the journey of the beekeeping in graph, because this would actually look like a heartbeat for me, okay? You see where you start in beekeeping and you're just a sponge. You absolutely love everything to go around bees, okay? And then the bad part that goes with that is that then you end up starting and looking at it and saying, I know everything there is about bees. Okay. I have multiple peaks of this peak of expertise. Okay. 50 years, I probably have about 12 of them right now. Okay. But what I love about it is there is the great humbler. And that's where that pit of disillusionment comes, where the bees die on you. You're absolutely heartbroken and you have no idea what just happened. Okay. It's the greatest place to be because then you're open to figuring out how to learn what the bees are telling you. One of my personal joys in beekeeping is exactly this, is educating others about the wonderful world of beekeeping. I love the next generation because they're the next generation that's going to figure out the challenges of beekeeping in the future. All right. The other part about it is they've got really strong backs and weak minds right now. So they lift boxes really nicely for me. Okay. So that's one of my biases on that. The other kind of cool thing is in a beekeeping community in Milton, I'm so excited for you guys. Is one of the nice things is you get a whole bunch of eyes in a beehive, and after you get done drooling over the bees, then you start expressing what you're seeing. And oftentimes, a different set of eyes shares the beehive in a different, beautiful way. And that's how we really learn from each other on that. And then what I am going to tell you, this is a group of beekeepers that we had finished up on a workshop of building equipment. And one of the things, the reason we took this picture is because I realized at this point in time, in my beekeeping journey, I've had the privilege of actually training over 1,000 beekeepers. In that time, I have over a dozen former students that have gone on to become master beekeepers, and then even one that's gone on to be a professional. And I like that legacy because that is something that is so beautiful about the beekeeping community is it brings us together. Bees are something that I call the friendship bees. They bring people from different walks of life, different community, and at the end of it, we have a common thing. We all get addicted to bees, and we don't know what the hell to do with that addiction. Is that true?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then my joy kind of goes from, from the education side is walking in the bee yard. All right. One of the things about it is I walk in a bee yard. I usually have a cup of coffee, half and half, no sugar in case you're up here. Okay. But I walk in a bee yard and the first thing I do is I start to smell the beautiful floral bouquet coming out of the beehive. And then the next thing that happens to me is I start to watch the flight of the bees. And you watch the flight of the bees and you can actually start to watch the color of pollen they bring in. You watch the color of pollen they bring in. And I don't know about you, but my mind wonders, where are they going? But it's so cool to watch them come home. And it's so purposeful. It is so intricate. And then here, where I've got a few hives up together, they don't get lost. That's pretty cool because they got a better GPS than you and I have. So I love that walking in. I never lose that sense of wonder walking into a bee yard. And I hope you never do either. Of course, when you walk into a bee yard like this, I'm thinking honey. Okay, I'm thinking honey. And not only can I smell it, but I'm all of a sudden, the backs of my eyes are starting to think how many jars I'm going to fill with that liquid gold. Okay. All right. And I don't know about you, but there is truly a personal sense of pride when you are able to hand somebody a jar of your honey from your bee yard that's unfiltered. You know the whole process. It's pretty cool to do that. And you know the thing about it is it's special too. It really is. Of course, I love bees. And when I start to see the bees looking like this, I'm real happy. You know, they're hanging out like forever. But one of the neat parts about it is it speaks about life. And they are alive and they're bringing the environment to you. And that tells you about the health of your environment. Of course, you know, a swarm is absolutely the most amazing thing. Now, Milton Bee Club, I know that you guys had Dr. Tom Seeley as one of your speakers, and I was one of the undergraduates that worked with Dr. Seeley when he was doing his postdoc work in the Arnott Forest, and he did all that swarm catching. You know, it wasn't him running, it was me. Okay, so we went and found, but the beautiful thing, a swarm is one of those amazing things when you see them in flight. First off, they're really loud. Okay, they're incredibly loud to watch. But the choreography of taking 12,000 bees, sometimes even more, and transporting them from point A to point B and not getting lost and not fighting over everything is really, really cool. One of the things I love about having a swarm, though, as a beekeeper, you know, when your neighbor calls you and they're in the juniper tree like this, right? They're busy freaking out and they're looking to pull out greenbacks for you, right? And you go there literally without any tools, right? And you just shake that branch and they fall in. They think you and Jesus have a really close relationship, you know, at this point in time. So it is one of the joys of it because then, you know, the demonstration of how gentle bees are at during a swarming season helps demystify bees as being this stinging object that people fear. And then on the other side of this, in my personal joys of beekeeping, I mean this with all sincerity. I am humbled by the sense of stewardship of these magnificent creatures. All I can really say to you is I really feel that it was my God given purpose to keep bees. They are amazing, and you can't help but see the magnificent design of God in the world when you look at a beehive. And so for me, it's each day, let me be a good steward of that which I have been allowed to keep on that. And I hope that each of you there in Milton and each of you here on Long Island get that sense that they are a magnificent creature on that. So hopefully I have warmed you guys up because now I'm going to have a little bit of a hard talk with you because now we're going to pivot to face the challenges to the future of beekeeping. And the changing face of beekeeping, here's four statistics I want you to come up with. The number of managed colonies has gone down to 2.5 million. Back in the 80s, the high of it was 3.8 million. The second thing that I want you to take a look at is the loss of forage, both by volume and quality. Estimated 1 million acres per year. Think about that. That's throughout the U.S., 1 million acres of open land. In Milton, do you guys see development happening?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, so every acre that is lost removes 43,560 square feet of area. Okay, it's not just about forage, it becomes loss of habitat for the diversity of insects. Okay, this is why we are losing 1 million of these acres every year in the U.S. All right. The third thing that's happened is that the increase in disease, pest, and cost. It's a triple negative. It is really hard. Beekeeping. I used to tell people that beekeeping was designed for Chris Kelly. Okay, because I could put the bees in the hive and they did the rest of the work. They made honey and I got the glory, right? But today you can't just do that. And then the final thing is there's been a decrease in both honey production per hive across the US and the price of honey. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot to you in a hobby setting, but from a professional setting, this has got great ramifications. And this was what started it. I call it the Varroa influence in beekeeping. Part of the Varroa influence is this: the hive losses look different. Before Varroa was the sole time, winter was the sole time to lose bees. And the only 3 ways you lost them was through moisture, starvation, or a disease, principally nosema. This is BV, is what I call that time. I'm one of the rare dinosaurs walking the earth that knew that time on it. And it really was a simpler time. But Varroa has changed this, because now a hive can die almost at any time of year on it. All you I trust there, you're familiar with mite loads, yes? In Milton?
Yes.
Yeah. We all talk mite loads. Anybody have nightmares about Varroa mites at night? Come on, you can raise your hand if you're. I can see you. Only one person in Milton. That's the only honest one. Okay, just a second. Okay. Oh, there's even a third. Okay. All right. Yeah. We all freak out about Varroa. Okay. The mite loads are something that we're all familiar with. Varroa actually vectors over 30 different diseases that we know of. Okay. I think it's probably quite a bit greater than that. And the disease nosema, really good book. Not good book, a good article, again by Randy Oliver of Scientific Beekeeping, has an article called Nosema, Not Your Daddy's Nosema. And what it talks about is the principal strain of Nosema used to be Nosema apis, which we used to say is kind of like when you had a little cold, the kid would get over it real quickly. With Nosema cerana, it is actually much more lethal. It stays in the system, and when combined with high mite loads, equals dead beehive. I hope you can see this graph, because this graph here by the U.S. Auburn University did this survey. I'm going to put the arrow into that gray line. That gray line is the average winter losses over the course of the years. They started back in 2008, before Varroa was present. The average loss of bees was between 5 and 10%. And you were considered a miserable beekeeper if you had 10% loss. Look at where this number is right now. It's averaging somewhere north of 35% just in one time frame. These other time frames, this one, I'm going to move it here to, it should look like a yellow. This summer loss of beehives, this is totally new. This is not something that was there. I like to tell people, when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth and I was keeping bees, okay, there was no summer losses, okay? This is a new byproduct of the invasion of Varroa, the influence of Varroa on our bees. When you combine these 2 losses together, guess where you got to? You got up into this 60% and higher range. This is crazy, people, because it is fundamentally It's fundamentally changing beekeeping, and beekeeping as a whole is not sustainable at this kind of loss rate. I hope you can you guys actually see this particular chart at all there in Milton?
Yep.
This is from my own personal bee yards, okay? What I did here is I put the locations. These are all in New York. But then what we did is I went and had the hive numbers, the hives that we lost, the amount of hives that we lost. And then what I like to do is I like to put the percentage. I like to work in percentages because then I can kind of see what these losses looked like. And really, we did really, really well. It's in a lot of areas. Here we've got one at 37%. Then I got a 75% loss, you see, on that one. And then one here right in my backyard, I was at 66% on that one. What I look at, what I like to do is I like to find when's the date of loss. Look at when those losses happen. Up in the upstate region, we had the losses at 11-1. That Halleckville to 37 was at 11.1 at 11 to February. The Mattituck was 11-1. The significance, the reason I keep a record, something like this, it gives me a timeline. Something happened between October 1st and November 1st that categorically changed the equation for those beehives. Okay? So, Bart,
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about breeding, and I believe that part of the deal here was that somebody from Milton is going to get a Long Island Survivor stock queen, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the breeding because this here is probably one of the more difficult aspects because in 30 years of breeding bees for resistance, it has had negligible results or effect against Varroa. And probably part of that is that the gene pool of our western honeybee, the Apis mellifera, is really quite limited. Statistically speaking, the genome is no different between northern bees and southern bees. And in fact, one of the questions I've been having for people is I've been asking, why, when I was a young boy and I used to order my 2-pound package out of Stover Apiaries in Mississippi, why could I grow a 2-pound package like that and have no problem with them overwintering? Whereas now there seems to be a conversation that says they are not, they're not adjusted to the northern climates. Okay. There's that question that comes out. And then the next question that comes is the open mating system of the queen to drones makes the maintenance of the bee stock kind of difficult. We're familiar with the mating flights of the queen honeybee. And you know, for about a week or two, she's basically a slut. You know that, right? You know that she mates with about 14 to 20 different drones for 2 weeks. All right? So you don't know where mama been. Okay? So that becomes significant because when you buy a strain of bee, let's just, for example, say you buy a buckfast queen. Okay? When you buy that buckfast queen, it's got very specific traits that are quite valuable. Really enjoy them. Okay? But when that queen dies and her daughter takes over, she's sleeping with different drones, right? So all of a sudden, you do not have the same stock that you started with. And that changed that rapidly also changes the ability of those bees to have this resistance. And one of the most common things, everybody's familiar with VSH?
No.
What?
No.
No.
Okay, that's not a disease up here in the north, okay? VSH is literally, it's a hygienic behavior, okay? It is sensitivity or some kind of level of being aware of varroa and then being able to take that varroa out of either the brood cell or off the adult or out of the hive. So we call it, it's kind of varroa sensitive hygienic behavior. There's a subset of that called the Poline queens, which are they're literally bred for pollination, but they actually have that VSH characteristic and this pollinating characteristic. Those two characteristics combined seem to be able to flatline the varroa mites from doing their wild spike in population and actually lowering that, thereby helping you to not have to treat as much and not have to kind of worry about that explosive mite load. Okay. And then finally, the use of pesticides and treatments has negatively impacted fertility levels. I mean, beekeepers ourselves, we did this to ourselves when we had, what was it? Checkmite. When we had checkmite. Checkmite, the active ingredient in checkmite, used to sterilize the drones. So we were our own worst enemy. We were treating for one problem, and we ended up creating yet another problem. Okay, so it was a classic case of a pesticide used at sublethal dose for the males, but it sterilized them. So it was a very bad interaction. So now I come back to this thing, that umbrella. Remember, I said in Mississippi, I used to get bees from the south and be able to have them up here in the north. Something has changed that now that we are seeing that there is a genetic expression that is different locally. And if you're following any of the kind of literature of today, the beekeepers are starting to say, you know what? Treatment with chemicals, treatment with whatever is not the answer. The genetics are. So we've got to pay attention to that. And what that really means is in the local setting, your bees are going to have an expression of the VSH and the Poline genome sequence in a different way than would probably be in Milton. So local queens are basically the way to go right now in terms of trying to start to develop varroa treatment on it. Everybody good? Has anybody got a question back there?
Oh, we're good. Good.
All right. Bart, is anybody sleeping in there?
No.
Because I got about half a dozen here asleep. Okay.
Come up.
Okay. Because here's on this particular slide, what I've done here, this is from the Long Island Survivors stock. Okay. What I've done is, you can see here, again, I just simplified it. The queen type is local. Okay. That means she's born and bred right in that area. In those areas, look at what the loss rate is at, 7.5. And I put down here free mated. Okay. Everybody I've got here has been free mated. Even in Long Island, we've got 16%. We only had these two areas, which were the same. I had put the Cutchogue and the Halleckville. It was the only ones that had the Southern Queens or these PCL Queens that we had here. And there was a difference. That was the only ones that put us up over into that 37 and 78%. So one of the things that I came to here, you see, I moved the arrow to take a look at that and say, maybe pesticides had a role in that number, because nothing else makes sense. Even in this Halleckville one, it's really at 37%. But compared to everybody else, nobody's up over 10% of their zone. So it brought a question to me about that. Hallettsville doesn't, but the surrounding area does. Yeah, the surrounding area does. There was a question asked right here that said, I thought Hallettsville does not spray pesticides. That is true. But remember that your bee's radius is 1 mile in terms of feeding. And we have vineyards on either side that spray quite heavily for pesticides. Quick question to the Milton group. Has anybody had their pollen actually tested for pesticide?
Afraid to.
What's that?
I don't
Don't
think,
want to.
yeah, I don't think anyone has, and we're scared to.
I fully relate to that one. I absolutely do. On it. So here's probably one of the more difficult parts of all of this here tonight is the environmental challenges to manage your bees. Okay? The loss of habitat due to development. Pesticides. Now, Milton here, this is not a bragging right here. This is a sad statement of New York. In my county, we had the highest pesticide use in the state, 6.5 million pounds in 2024. That's a crazy number, okay? And to give you a little reference, Milton, Long Island is a giant sandbar, okay? We're about 100 miles long. We're 20 miles wide at the widest. Where I am, way out at the east end, is 1 mile wide. So we're a sandbar with a little bit of topsoil on it. I think our highest hill wouldn't even constitute a pothole in Milton, okay? So it's really problematic because it means the soil, anything you put on the ground in Long Island ends up in the water table on it. And proof of that is at my house. I actually have well water, and our local county water department loves to come to my house. I used to think they liked me. It had nothing to do with liking me. It had everything to do with the fact that they could test the well, and it came up with over 100 different materials in the water. That's crazy. Okay. All right. I don't even have 3 heads, and I've been there 34 years. All right. The final thing is the climate interferes with the plume sequence and the population curve of the bees. And finally, the food quality, even that the bees are getting, is decreasing. This is right down the road from me. This used to be a wooded lot and an open, literally an open meadow. And this is what we got there now. All right. Pesticides, and I need to talk about this, is pesticides permeate and contaminate our environment. Both sublethal and lethal amounts in and around beehives. They don't just affect the fertility of queens and drones, they affect all of us. Okay? Pesticides I did this past fall and winter. I put out a survey to over 120 beekeepers, and I purposely sorted it by 3 different groups. I did the professional beekeeper groups. Okay? Those are the boys that are earning their living with bees. The minimum size that I did for was 1,000 beehives. Okay? Then I have the hobbyist beekeeper, which is what I am, anywhere from 300 to 500 beekeepers. And then I have, I should say, correction, I called myself a sideline. Okay? 300 to 500. And then the hobbyist as being from 1 to almost to 300. The reason I did this is what I was most interested. The question I asked every time was, what were the top 3 things that you thought was the challenges to beekeeping? So for the hobbyists. But actually, Milton, let me ask you that very question. Why don't you answer that? And then I'm going to give you the responses I got. Milton, what's your top 3 challenges to beekeeping in Georgia right now?
Pesticide is one of them.
Pesticide is one.
Yeah.
Varroa.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes the cold temps, but I know you guys probably have that a lot.
Yeah. I was also thinking the weather, because sometimes, I mean, we'll have a decent run of weather. In fact, recently we had a cold snap that basically the bees were flying. It's like, oh, okay, it's spring.
And, we went
and
from
then
80 degrees to
Just
20
20.
degrees.
yeah. So that was hard to watch.
Yeah.
I had probably 1,000 dead bees that
Yeah.
next day.
Yep.
Yeah, really.
Yep.
I really, really appreciate those answers, because I want to come back to that climate. That is to me, the big scary. You're at 80 degrees at noon and you're at 20 degrees at 6 p.m. at night. The bees can't move quick enough and recover quick enough, and you really lose a lot of bees. I hate seeing that. But I am very impressed, because you are the first hobbyist group that has named pesticide as being the #1 challenge. Okay? Because the professionals, every one of them to the last man standing, says pesticides are their #1 issue. The second issue for them happens to be right around the price of honey. Okay? Because right now we're importing more honey per year than we actually consume as a nation. Okay? The corollary with that is the fact that it also is a lot of adulterated honey. Now, adulteration can happen both intentionally and unintentionally. I think a lot of hobbyist beekeepers unintentionally supplementally feed too much sugar syrup through their honey flow and do the same thing. Okay, so let's not get there. What was interesting was with sideliners. Wait a second. And then the third thing that came up for the professionals was really just the cost of doing business. The cost for just buying woodware, just buying anything, has gone up something on the order of 20%. So they're very, very much concerned. So notice none of those 3 said Varroa up on that big scale. Part of that it has had to is that they feel like between their queen breeding and their actual management of the Varroa mite loads, they can keep them fairly stable. That may change in the future. The sideliners like me, okay, I had pesticides as #1. Okay, I had Varroa as #2, and then I have the climate as #3. So see, Milton, I'm almost a kindred spirit with you. See that? Got it. But and then what you see on most of the hobbyist levels is they start with Varroa, and I think you actually miss seeing the forest from the trees. Okay, the Varroa is a problem. It is a pain, but I don't think it's the top one there. Climate change. This is out of our control. Okay, bloom sequences are being interfered with or interrupted. Last year, in an area, we had a peach bloom that started right around Valentine's Day. That peach bloom, okay, the blooms were out in 40-something degree weather. And I don't know about you, my bees didn't even get off the front stoop to go looking for them. So what it really impacts is that a really good flower like peaches becomes completely unavailable and unusable to the bees because they can't even fly in that. And vice versa, is that when you have temps in excess of 90 degrees, guess what happens? the bees shut down again because they're just trying to cool things down, and your flowers shorten up in terms of actually yielding nectar. Population growth and decline of hives has changed, at least, and I'm going to speak specifically for the Long Island context. Normally, the bell curve was like this. For us, our peak population hits right shortly after Flag Day, around June 21st, the longest day of the year. And then it starts a steady, slow decline. Due to the amount of heat that we've actually had, we actually are starting to see an August, September burp in our population. Normally, I would think, wow, that's really good. That's cool. No, it's a bad thing because in our climate up here, we need literally 5 months of reserves of food for our bees to make it through winter, which is the equivalent of about 60 pounds of honey on them. So if they are doing another growth spurt, they're actually chewing into the very reserves they need for winter. And then finally, food quality and quantity is altered. This has been actually documented that the pollen protein levels have declined by over 4%. In other words, instead of being, let's just say, an 18% value, it now has a 14% value. And the trouble is that bees don't notice the difference between an 18 or a 14% pollen. They pack the same amount of pollen. They're not getting the same value. I guess the best way to put it is, in theory, a Big Mac and a filet mignon are the same thing. They're both called beef. But we both know that the two are very, very different quality. And how your body processes those two different meats is very, very different. No. So if I have not got you completely depressed yet, I'm working on some additional ones here. Okay? Here it is that these are side things. One is the adulterated honey. This is going to become, or is, a big issue. It's both intentional and unintentional. Because beekeepers, one of the greatest prides that you could do is to hand your jar of honey to somebody and know what the process was from start to finish. And it's beautiful. But now, with the volume of adulterated honey, it's actually bastardizing the quality and literally the specialness of that honey. This is really bad on every level, because once people say, you know what, I can't taste the difference, we lost. And I personally would hate to see that. Adulterated honey, typically what happens is a lot of imported honey has high fructose corn syrup in it, very hard to detect, okay? Or beekeepers actually feeding their bees straight through the honey flow. So then even that syrup that they fed them through ends up mixed into the honey as well. That's what I'm talking about. Is there any other question on that? Yes. Question was raised, what is the impact on the taste and the viscosity of the honey? You actually can tell it quite clearly. First off, it's going to have what I would call a neutral taste. In other words, it's no definitive, distinctive floral kind of component or flavor profile that comes out at you. The second part about it is, if you smell that honey, it's going to have a neutral nose. It's going to be completely neutral to you on it. There are some tests. I think you can drop some in water, honey in water, and shake it, and it's supposed to not, if it doesn't dissolve. I never remember which way it is, but at the end of the day, it's going to look, taste, and feel different. Okay? The second part is this insect apocalypse, okay? Please, this is required reading by you. Insect loss as an early warning of systemic biological failure. Just came out by Brownstone Institute and at the first of this year. It is a sobering read, and if you want to get even more depressed, go ahead and read the book Extraordinary Insects. It's done by a Norwegian lady. It is mind-blowing to show you the impact of just the loss of one species does the ripple effect of that loss. And I am really thankful for bee groups to being aware of this. But we are now, this is the third thing I'm looking at, the science narrative in my area, and I'm going to speak for my area, in the face of depleted resources. What I mean by that is development has overtaken open space. So now, once that happens, honeybees are being viewed as a part of the problem. The very bees that we love, the very bees that we know take a valuable part in our whole our whole agriculture system. They're now being viewed as kind of, the best way I like to look at it is a beehive to maintain itself uses a lot of resources. Okay, an average beehive in the Northeast would need 300 pounds of nectar. Okay, that's coming from the flower. 300 pounds of nectar to survive one hive. Okay, a solitary beehive with the solitary bee actually only needs one cell and maybe an ounce or so of honey to go through that same thing. So it's the difference between having a gas guzzler and a Prius. Okay, but we're not talking apples to apples here. We are though talking about a public perception. And we are going to be in trouble if they start to enact legislation that says no bees in park areas, no bees in state land. I think it's going to be something that we need to be mindful, because oftentimes, if you heard me I talked about the beehive and I talked about the solitary bee. You know, the one detail I left completely out is habitat. And that's what gets lost in translation here. We're not just losing open space, but the very habitat that the native bees need is what's getting lost. That is a bigger issue than the actual lost space. That makes sense. Okay, so this is what I'm saying to you guys. The goalposts have moved. Okay, that's the way I like to look at this. And these are my personal observations of changes in beehives since 2023. And the first and the foremost is strong colonies failing. Really strong hives, to give you an idea, in 53 years of keeping bees, we were always taught that the strongest hive is the best indicator that you've got a successful hive and you're going to be okay. Guess what? What flies in the face of that is Varroa. A strong hive can tolerate very, very high mite loads. So they can become what I call the walking dead. Last year, we had a beehive that had 176 mites per 300 bees. They should have been dead. They were flying, they were doing just great. Okay? But here's the thing. We know that hive was the walking dead. At some point, due to virus vectoring, due to some weakening of the total immune system, those bees were going to die. Next thing that we've had happen that's new to me here on Long Island is a post-honey harvest, a hive completely dying. Now, I have a brother that lives south of the Mason-Dixon line. He lives in South Carolina. And he has told me that if you harvest honey in South Carolina past July 4th, you would see this very same thing. Do you have that happen in Georgia? Do you have an end date for harvesting honey?
Yeah.
So does that consider feeding them in fall and winter, or?
No. All I'm just saying is when your honey flow is done, or when you would say, this is the last time I would harvest honey because it would affect the bees negatively?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah. Probably.
yeah, definitely.
What was that?
Yes, like July, probably,
Let's say
early,
June, yeah.
yeah, early
Late
July,
June,
late June, yeah.
So you would be similar to my brother there in South Carolina, where he says don't do it after into July because for whatever reason it causes a downward run with them on it. And then of course these bees dying in the winter. Now, when I talk about dying in the winter, these bees are not small colonies. Remember, these are we overwinter here in double deeps because we need to, and these bees, when they went into winter, filled out at least a full single of 10 frames or more. So to see these die leaves a big puzzle to me. The second part for me that I've seen is swarming behavior has changed. It's not for us no longer just a spring cycle. See also that change in growth. We're starting to see it in August and September. That is a death knell for us up here in the north. Do you guys see that at all by you?
It's pretty rare to have swarms outside of season. I mean, but if they do, obviously there's no chance for the leaving the existing hive because they're not going to be able to mate a queen.
Okay, okay. Because what I'm saying is this there's an unusual population curve. We've seen a change. I can't say I like it. And now, mind you, it's only since 2023 that I've seen it. So this year is going to be the fourth season that we'll be seeing whether this happens. What I am also seeing, though, because of the disease pressure, because of the pest pressure, hives are less resilient, and invasive frame inspections set hives back longer and harder. So where do we go from here?
Long Island.
So I put this as finding joy to the changing times for beekeeping. And I came up with the phrase less is more. And what that really starts with is a different inspection program. Okay. I used to follow quite religiously in the spring, every week we would be in a hive. Once we got into summer, we would stretch out to as far as 10 days. And then in the fall, we will go back to every 7 days, literally almost coming into October 1st. I use October 1st because in our area, we have a frost date of about October 15th. It's going later now into the season, meaning our frost date is kind of moved to November 1st. So what that means for us up here is that effectively ends any kind of food source coming in. But what I mean by a different inspection program is I am not going in that frequently. And what it is doing, what I'm mindful about is an inspection used to, when you did a 7-minute inspection, that inspection would set back the hive anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. Now the data is starting to show that that same inspection today can set the hive back between 1 and 2 days. That's a significant change. If you put it in context, if your inspection happens at the start of your main honey flow, you've set the hive back for 2 days. Let's just add on to that after 2 days, you have a rain event where the bees can't fly. So let's just say that your main honey flow is for 21 days, where the first week takes 70% of that honey flow. You just lost most of it because of inspection and weather. So I'm pretty mindful of that. Second thing that I really, really love is a simple hive scale. Okay. For me, it's really great because then what you can do, you can actually monitor the weight of a hive in a bee yard, and that gives you an indicator is your hive actually bringing in, or is your hive losing weight? And you can decide from there. The third thing is that I've had to really rethink this, is engineering a bee yard differently to adjust drift, specifically for varroa. Making bee yards in a circle or a semicircle even, spacing them wider apart. I don't have a problem with having really different colored beehives, because my daughter used to be my bee box painter. So it depended what kind of mood she was in. I could get anything from black to pink. Okay. One of the things that different colored hives and different entrance locations do is it helps the bees orient. And that's probably the most valuable thing that you can do for them in on that. The other thing about engineering a bee yard differently is being aware of hive density. Don't put 20 hives in an area that shouldn't be there. So I think that's equally as difficult. Hygiene in hive health. Okay, there's a couple of things. I don't know. Did anybody from Milton? Did any of you guys make it up to NABI?
Wish.
No,
American Honeybee Expo?
not this
Last
year.
year. Last year we did.
Okay. Because this past year there was a nice talk by the guy out of I think he was out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the USDA guy. He gave a talk on the value of roughing up the inside of your beehives so that your hive does that thicker coat of propolis. And what it showed, the data was actually quite illuminating. Because what happened is they tested the wax, they tested the pollen, they tested the honey for pesticides. And then they tested the propolis. When they tested the propolis, they found that the pesticide residue in the propolis was 1,000 times higher than any other part of the beehive. So they freaked at first when they saw that, because it was so high in concentration. But what they then learned is the layer of propolis was entombing that poison. So it's very clear the bees actually can pick up the pesticide poison and move it. So the idea of these roughened interiors to actually coat that or have a thicker coat of propolis is really quite good on it. Rotate out old combs. Okay, for me, this was quite a revelation. All right, I used to have comb that was anywhere from 30 to 35 years old. All right, it had every disease known to mankind probably in it. I no longer have that, and the USD up here in New York, or USDA up here in New York, has documented the volume and load of Nosema spores in my hives has dropped from being a disaster to being something where it is almost on a negligible level. So rotating out combs is really a very, very valuable. The only problem with it is, of course, it's costly. The recommendation is to have a comb no older than 5 years. The queen breeders I've been speaking to, both on the West Coast and down in Missouri, Corey Stevens out of Missouri, these guys don't want to have comb older than 2 years, because they do not trust that pesticide residue in the comb is not having a negative effect on their queen breeding on it. And then finally, just sanitize your tools. All right, use a torch to blow, to clean up your hives, or steel wool, alcohol, or anything. Because I'm going to tell you, the cleaner that you can keep things, the better off you are. And then I'd say to you, experiment. Experiment in your area for what works for you to winter your bees. Up here, I actually do some indoor overwintering. It's in a controlled atmosphere. It's really cool. It's really nice because I can be really lazy. I can keep about 70 hives in a single space. I can keep them in a single deep and just feed them through the winter, and they do just fine. Because what's interesting about this in that suspended animation is they feed at literally 30% of what a normal hive will do. So they go very much slow, and the 12-week period they're in from November 1st till anywhere from March 1st, March 15th. They're all out of there now on it. But you can experiment with insulation or even the condensing beehives. And then finally, one of the thoughts that you may want to consider once you find a strain or something that you like is the idea of using artificial insemination of your queens as a breeding tool. Manage your hive density, food availability, timing, quality, and quantity. Okay, my daughter taught me how to use Google Earth, so I can actually be able to map out where my flower sources are coming 3 seasons out of the year, because the hives of today are less resilient than the hives of the days gone by. I want to encourage you now to please trust yourselves and experiment. Keep good records, slow the process down. Really slow it down, observe your bees, your environment, and then connect the dots. Here's some references I've left for you, Bart. I'll make sure this presentation, I'll email it to you.
Thank you.
All these resources are really valuable. Project Apis M, USDA, the Honeybee Health Coalition, and of course the Milton Bee Club. All right?
Thank you, Chris.
Bart.
This all started off with one idea way back when, and we had our first bee talks with Bob Binney, Rebecca Griffin, followed by Tom Seeley, and now concluded for now with the great Chris Kelly. It's phenomenal, thank you. I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
Where do bees go to the bathroom?
What was that?
Where do bees go to the bathroom?
Bart, you don't know when bees go to the bathroom?
Well, I'll help you, Chris. Anybody there knows the answer?
I think he's joking with me. Yeah. Are you talking about when they're indoors?
Punchline coming. Punchline coming,
Yes.
guys.
I'll help you. They go to the BP. You're welcome.
You got me on that one, Bart.
All right.
For the benefit of time, shall we, any questions or a little Q&A? Do you still have some time for that?
Whatever you want.
Anybody?
Wait, I got a question here, Bart. Go ahead.
How do you test the pollen?
Okay, the question was asked, how you test your pollen for pesticides? What you do is you send it up to Cornell. You would take cells of pollen. You got to be careful because you don't want to mix the wax in with it. So use like a toothpick, and you can actually just scrape it out into a container. Then you ship it up to Cornell. They're very good. They're pretty fast. Penn State does sampling, but I'm not sure whether they do for pesticide on pollen. They do a good job of checking honey for adulteration, and they can actually tell you the sources that your honey came from. We got another question?
Do we have other questions?
Yes, we got a question here.
So if you don't mind, I'm gonna video you. So you're gonna be published in like NBC and all of them. They're gonna
All
get
the
us.
things.
I'm glad. I'm glad. How do you roughen the inside of the hive for the propolis?
Oh, you can use a wire reel. You know, use a wire reel.
Okay.
And you can literally go up and down. Yeah, it's fairly quick. It's fairly easy to do. And the other part about that is what you can actually do is while you are, a lot of people tend to clear their hives of all the propolis that's going on. Try to stop yourself from doing that and allow them to keep it.
Key locations in the hive, you recommend doing that?
Yeah, I would start with I honestly, I would actually only do the brood chambers. I would only do the brood chambers. I don't think I would need to go up into the honey chambers. But if you have the time and the wherewithal to do it, you can certainly do the honey boxes as well.
So I have a question, maybe I shouldn't ask, but how do you artificially inseminate a queen?
Yes.
Actually, what you need a special stereoscope microscope, okay, which it has illumination. You anesthetize the queen a little bit with CO2, okay, and then they've got all sorts of little not calipers, but there are clips that can actually keep her in position, and then you can go from there. That's
Okay.
It's not for the faint of heart.
I would say.
So along the lines of that artificial insemination, so we talked about the queen's participation in all this. So what about the drones?
The way that works, Bart, is the drones are selected the same, almost, they only come from what your breeder's stock is. All right. So in other words, you're not gonna just randomly go to 14 different hives. What you actually do is the breeder stock that you have, that you like the characteristics of those hives. Those are where the drones would come from to do the insemination process.
The thing you were just talking about, re-engineering your bee yard. I inadvertently did that 2 years ago because you're being raised by an old-timer beekeeper. You need to keep a clean sheet around your beehives, etc. And then one year, all of a sudden, a flowering weeds shot up on the side of the hive. And the thing you said about making it for the orientation for the bees, like at first I'm like, hey, I'm gonna whack it down, but it's shown to be beneficial in my opinion. Just like when you move a hive, you put something in front of the hive to get the orientation going again.
Absolutely.
Similar.
Yeah. What I want to encourage you is use your power of observation. Your power of observation is really key here. What you've observed is working for you, isn't it?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So if it's working for you that way, use it until it proves you otherwise, right?
All righty. Any more questions? Yes. Hold on, Chris. One more question from Anna.
Really simple. What's the best way to sanitize the tools?
I love to use a torch on it, okay, because then I can literally burn off the propolis, and the wax will melt literally right off of it, and the heat will kill nosema spores off of it. Absent of that, the second best way is actually using rubbing alcohol and steel wool on it, and you can clean it up and rough it up that way. And I really would encourage you to do that. The second part to that goes almost hand in hand is you can leave, if you have multiple bee yards, is to leave a hive tool at each of the bee yards, so you know that you're not doing cross contamination.
You said less is more when inspecting. So how often do you recommend to inspect the hives, if not 1 week at a time? Every other week?
On this one. Here's what happens is we are coming out of winter and we're into our early spring. Have you guys already done a frame and in-frame inspection?
We're a month ahead of you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're kind of a month ahead of me. What I like to do is I do my first inspection gives me an overall kind of gauge of where the bees came through winter at. Once I have that gauge, the guys that what I would say were doing just fine get ignored the following week. But the guys that are in problems, those are the guys I'll address. Okay. So right away that would kind of stretch them out almost to a 2-week cycle right in the spring. All right. Because I know with my good hives, I can easily project how the population curve is going on that. But with the problematic hive, that's the one that you want to pay attention to. And what I actually find with it is it makes life even easier doing that. And what I would say to you, especially once you've gotten past your main honey flow, you could probably stretch it out into really, really close to that 16 to 20 day range. And the reason you could do that is as long as you had, at some point, you've had a good mite monitor count, you can project pretty well where you're going with things then.
Thank you, Chris. Shall we proceed with the raffle? And if you can give some background on your generous and kind donation to our Big Little Bee Club.
Well, all my northern bees all want to become, what we call snowbirds. They all want to go south. I was really, really delighted to be asked by the Milton Bee Club to talk, and hopefully I have not depressed you or disappointed you too.
No.
But I would say to you this: what I call the Long Island survivor stock are bees that are hand raised by me here on Long Island, and I've been doing this for a little over 25 years. And what they have, the expression that I look for is a little bit different than most bee breeders in that my primary goal is what I call how do they come through winter. And what I look for is what I call the rate of burn. How much food do they go through on a weekly basis in the winter? The more conservative they are, the more I really like that. Because what that does is it insulates them when they come into our March time, where we have those same variations of temperature of 60 degrees, then 20. These bees don't add too much brood too quickly. And then that way they don't chill out and they don't grow too rapidly. But once they do, they're right in with the bloom sequence.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Proceed to the raffle of...
You sure can, but please let them know that that queen will only be available about the first week of May.
I think we can live with that. It's perfect timing.
You won't come up north and hunt me down, right?
Yes, we will. So, okay, can you
Read the number.
read the number? Oh, pardon me.
Oh, okay. Number is.
Yes. Would the individual like the queen marked?
Of course.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm speaking for the individual.
Hey, this is New York prices. It's $20.
20. The winner is, the last three digits are 145. I'm assuming all the first digits are the same.
I won.
Yay! All right, then we are showing up.
Somebody's gotta have it.
Oh,
That's Dwayne!
All right. Yes, sir.
So you'll get me a name and address?
I'll share all that
He's gonna
information.
drive up there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wait, I think it May.
What do you
We'll
hold?
show up in May.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. Milton, thank you very much for the invite. Hopefully we meet again, okay?
Hey, don't go anywhere. Check out these two videos too.